Hello, coders. It is time to take a little pause from learning more data types. You would say, why? I know it's so much fun, and we can see that you've been lapping up with all the new data types that you're learning, all the coding you're doing. But at this juncture, it is important where we take a small shift and learn to become good programmers and take on one practice so that as we continue to learn, we will start to incorporate a good, clean coding practice. This will help us to be able to write, debug, run our programs as it is expected to be done by programmers. Even if you decide to participate in some small or bigger coding competitions, hackathons, challenges, you will be expected to do this style of programming. I know you're now very curious to know what I'm talking about. What we're going to learn is how do we write functions to keep our code very understandable, easy to use, clear and concise, and definitely code that can be maintained well. So what do we mean when we say functions? So a function is basically something which does a specific work. It takes care of a specific area of your logic. It's not going to be difficult for you to understand this because you have been making use of a lot of functions already in your coding journey. So do you want to quickly recollect and think of all the functions you've used? So take a pause and list them down. So let's look at the functions which we have been using, and we will also try to derive at some characteristics of the functions based on what we have used so far. If we look at print, it's been our friend. What does print do? Very clearly, it just outputs on the console whatever we ask it to do. It's one of the most flexible functions. In a function, we pass them parameters or arguments to a function using comma. So like right now, we have written this print which has 3 arguments. The first one is a string. The second one is a function. And the third one is a string again. Basically, print can take variable number of arguments. And when we execute it, this function will get executed and the value will get inserted at this place. Now let us look at another function, input. Input takes a parameter, it prints it on the console and it allows user to enter on the console. And whatever the user has input is always returning of type string. Now here we see print, it is just taking one parameter. Now next we are doing is we are creating a list and then we are using another function, length. Now what does length do? In length, we have passed it as a list. And what it has done, it has calculated the number of elements in the list. If we were to summarize, a function can take arguments. So it can be either none, 1, 2, 3, or whatever number. There can also be optional number of arguments. For example, we have seen in rand range, we don't always have to specify the start one. So by default, it will take it as 0. And then we specify the stop. And then there's a step also. The second thing what we learned is that a function can return a value given data type. So for example, here it is a string. Now there's one kind of function which we have not looked at. Let's look at that also. So this list, it has a function called sort. Now what this function sort does, it will sort this list into the same list. So basically number of functions list. If we print this after running the sort function, we will see that the same list has changed. Now it is sorted. If we try to take its return value, you will see it is listing a none here. So basically this function sort, it does not return anything. It just changes the list in place. Now, one thing I would like to call out that when you're calling a function, you don't really have to know what is that function doing inside. All you have to know is this is what it takes and this is what it does. So similarly, when we write our functions, this is a characteristic we will try to imbibe. How do we define our own function? So the word really is define, D-E-F. Def is the keyword which is used to define a function. So we're going to define a function called min. My min is what we're going to define because min is an existing function and we give it brackets, and here we mention the number of parameters, the number of arguments it can accept. So here we want it to accept a list. Okay, for now, that's the main data type which we've learned. It can take a string also. So basically, a collection, and like everywhere else, we also end the definition line by a colon. Now, when we enter it, remember the indentation is important. Whatever definition of the function we make, it has to be indented in. And the moment we indent out of this, the function will be considered complete. That is the way the interpreter identifies that the function definition is over. So I've defined the function myMin, taken my collection. I have used a variable called small here, and that is what I'm setting, and that is what I'm returning. In my for loop, also have used these variables. Now, one thing which I want to call out, it may be a little hard for you to understand, but just try to be with me here. Now, whatever variables we have defined here inside this function, they are the frogs of this pond alone. Okay, what it means is basically you cannot access these variables outside this definition. Where you're calling this function, that guy does not know that you have used these variables inside, or that it is returning the value in this small variable. Now think of it, when you call this function len, the implementation of this function len, it may be using certain variables, certain operations, everything to get you the actual count. And then it will return you that count. And you have created your own variable here. If somebody else, your friend who's also doing this learning right now, can call len and completely use a different variable. But the value of len, it will get stored in the variable which you are using to store it. So it doesn't matter what variables this function len is using inside its implementation. Now let's see and make use of this mymin. So what I've done, I've defined a list called random scores and called this function mymin and printed it, right? So it has printed mymin number is min number. Let me do exactly the same thing, but instead of calling mymin, I will call the system min, right? Can you see the color change? So this is the system min. Let's rename the variable system min number. And now we will run it. So there you go. I'm also going to show you one more magic. I'm creating a new Python file called calling my functions. Now what I'm doing from my min-max, I've just kept the definition and I've removed everything else. Now I'm going to import my min-max, just like I have imported the Python created modules. And I'm going to call this here and let's see what happens. So you got an error, name mymin is not defined. Can you guess why it is? Besides the default Python libraries, whenever you had to call functions, remember you had to give the name of the module. So that's what we have not done. Once we have imported it and we have used it, just look at it the same way. The function that you have created is exactly working in the same way as the system function. Isn't it so cool? You are able to now create your own module just by writing .py and being able to import it and call it. Immense, isn't it? Before we close this tutorial, let me also quickly show you, just like my min, because this is my min max, it makes it more complete if I also define my max. So once I've done that, let's just come quickly and call it. Now to call it, I'm going to put the name of the module and put a dot. Do you see both the functions defined in your module are showing up? Immense, isn't it? I'm excited. I hope you are. So now you are in your journey to start writing functions for your own code. Over to your next assignment. Yes, you're going to be writing functions. See you on this other side. Happy coding. Bye-bye.